good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, we drift into Edwardian England, a time of lace, candlelight, and quiet deceit. Behind the fragile civility of the era walked a man whose smile promised love, and whose hand delivered death. He didn't stalk the streets with a knife or a gun. He prowled the hearts of lonely women. Each saw in him a savior, a partner, a chance for security. What they couldn't see was the ledger behind his eyes, where every kiss, every vow was tallied in pounds and shillings. This is the story of George Joseph Smith, the man history would name the Brides in the Bath murderer. A man who found his fortune not in business or bloodshed, but in the slow drowning of trust itself. George Joseph Smith was born on January 11, 1872, in Bethnal Green, London. The son of an insurance agent, raised among narrow streets and narrower chances. He wasn't born to wealth, nor did he earn it. But from a young age, he learned something far more profitable: how to lie. At 9 years old, he was sent to a reformatory for theft. By adolescence, he'd perfected his charm, the kind that made a mark lean forward, not step back. He served time for petty fraud, then bigger ones. And somewhere between the prison walls and the open road, he realized the truth that would shape his life. People were easier to steal from than safes. In 1898, under one of his many aliases, Oliver George Love, Smith married a woman named Caroline Beatrice Thornhill. She adored him, and he adored what she could steal. Together, they robbed her employers until she was caught and sentenced to a year in prison. Upon release, she turned him in. He served 2 years. When he walked free, he walked away, with another woman's savings in his pocket. It was the start of a pattern, one he would refine over decades. Smith didn't need violence to get what he wanted. Not yet. He needed only patience, flattery, and a wedding band. Between 1908 and 1914, George Joseph Smith lived several lives. Each began with a ceremony, a smile, and a kiss. Each ended with an empty room, a missing husband, and a drained bank account. He married Florence Wilson in Worthing and left days later, £30 richer. He wed Sarah Freeman, stole her bonds, and vanished. He took another wife, Alice Reed, under yet another name, sold her possessions, and slipped away into the crowd. In all, Smith entered into at least 7 bigamous marriages. He lied with elegance, always well-dressed, always soft-spoken. He made women believe in devotion while he calculated their worth. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The quick thefts were no longer enough. The man who once lived off deceit began to hunger for something larger, faster, final. He needed a new trick, one that would make him rich and erase the only witness. Her name was Bessie Mundy, a reserved woman in her 30s, modest but well off, with a small inheritance and a trusting heart. When Smith appeared, under the name Henry Williams, he was attentive, kind, everything she believed a gentleman should be. They married quickly in 1912, and soon after, he persuaded her to make a will in his favor. Weeks later, she was dead. She had taken a bath, he told the authorities, and must have fainted. The landlady had found her, naked, her head tilted back, her hair fanned in the water, no bruises, no struggle. Just a tragic accident, said the coroner. Her husband, newly widowed, collected her savings and moved on. And in the still water of that rented tub, George Joseph Smith discovered how profitable a drowning could be. One year later, in 1913, Smith found his next bride. Her name was Alice Burnham, a young nurse with kind eyes and a quiet trust. He married her under his own name and took her to a lodging house in Blackpool. The honeymoon was brief. The death, swifter still. Alice was found dead in the bath by her landlady. Smith appeared shocked, distressed, almost convincing. He explained that Alice had been feeling faint. The doctor agreed. Once again, the verdict read, accidental drowning. He sold her jewellery, withdrew her savings, and disappeared. By then, Smith had perfected his performance, grief when required, charm when necessary, distance when dangerous. Each death made him bolder. Each woman, a line item in a growing list of profits. December 1914. The world was at war, but George Joseph Smith was at work. He met Margaret Elizabeth Lofty, 38, newly independent and eager to remarry. Under the alias John Lloyd, he wooed her with poetry and promises. On December 17th, they were wed. The next morning, she opened a joint bank account with him. That afternoon, she took out a life insurance policy, naming him sole beneficiary. That evening, she was found dead in her bath. The landlady recalled how Smith had gone out to fetch milk. When he returned, he called up to the rooms with mock alarm. "She's fainted," he cried. But she hadn't fainted. She drowned in 10 inches of water. The pattern was too perfect to be coincidence, but no one yet saw the full picture. Until a letter arrived at Scotland Yard. Detective Arthur Neal received the letter in January 1915. It came from a boarding house owner named Joseph Crossley in Blackpool. Enclosed were 2 newspaper clippings, both about women who had drowned in their baths shortly after marriage, both with eerily similar details. One bride, Alice Smith, had died in Blackpool in 1913. Another, Margaret Lloyd, had drowned in Highgate just weeks ago. Different towns, different names, but the same story. Neil's instinct stirred. He ordered a background check on the husbands and found they were, impossibly, the same man. Within days, he traced Smith's movements through marriage registers, bank ledgers, and hotel logs. The puzzle assembled itself. 3 dead wives, 1 man, countless lies. On February 8, 1915, George Joseph Smith was arrested. Even then, he seemed calm, almost amused. He gave the police no trouble, offered no confession, but his many aliases betrayed him. Records from Leicester, Bristol, and London told the same story, the same handwriting, the same bridegroom, the same result. Scotland Yard dug deeper. They exhumed Bessie Mundy and Alice Burnham. The bodies told a quiet truth. No signs of struggle, but lungs full of water. The unmistakable signature of controlled drowning. The prosecution turned to Sir Bernard Spilsbury, a rising forensic pathologist. He studied the reports, the bathtubs, the weight of the bodies. Then he made a chilling discovery. A bather, when startled, can be drowned in an instant, without bruises, without sound. Spilsbury demonstrated it before the court using a policewoman volunteer, proving that a sudden tug on the feet could submerge the head before the victim had time to gasp. It was science catching up to murder. The trial began on June 22nd, 1915, at the Old Bailey. Crowds lined the steps, their curiosity morbid and electric. Reporters called it the most extraordinary case of modern times. The evidence was methodical. Marriage certificates, bank withdrawals, and life insurance policies, each tied neatly together with death certificates. The witnesses painted a portrait of deceit: the charming husband, the vanished suitor, the women who never saw the truth until it was too late. When the prosecution rested, Smith remained motionless, expression blank. He claimed the women had been ill, prone to fainting. He insisted their deaths were tragic accidents, but no jury could believe coincidence that precise. 3 brides, 3 bathtubs, 1 man standing dry beside them all. On July 1st, 1915, after a mere 20 minutes of deliberation, the jury found George Joseph Smith guilty of murder. Smith was hanged on August 13, 1915, at Maidstone Prison. He declined a final confession. No remorse, no reflection, only silence. The same silence that had filled those rooms where his wives took their final breaths. Outside the prison walls, the public was divided. Some saw him as a monster, others as a curiosity of human nature, the polite killer whose only weapon was trust. Inside, the hangman's lever fell, and George Joseph Smith's long con finally ended. He left no family, no legacy, and no love letters that told of remorse. Just the echoes of water, the chill of porcelain, and the memory of women who loved him too soon. Smith's case did more than horrify England. It transformed it. Forensic science took a leap forward that year. Spilsbury's reconstruction became a cornerstone of modern criminology, and prosecutors learned that a pattern could speak louder than blood. The phrase "brides in the bath" entered history, shorthand for betrayal cloaked in tenderness. It forced investigators to see marriage not as sanctuary, but as potential stage. It taught that evil need not scream. It could whisper. It could smile, pour tea, and offer you a towel. So tonight, as the fire burns low, imagine it: a quiet lodging house, a clawfoot tub, a woman humming softly, her truss complete, and a man just outside the door, sleeves rolled, expression calm, counting what he's about to inherit. When the water stills, the house is silent again, but outside, the gaslight flickers and footsteps fade into the night. George Joseph Smith taught a generation of detectives that monsters don't always hide in shadows. Sometimes they wear wedding rings, and if you listen closely, you can still hear the echo of those baths filling, one bride at a time.
Thanks for listening. This has been Fireside Crime Stories, where the darkest tales are always read by firelight. If you haven't already, subscribe, and before you drift off, toss a little fuel on the fire. Hit that like button, ring that bell, so when the shadows shift again, you'll be the first to know that another fire's burning and another story's being told. Until next time, rest well.